Rights to freedom is dead. We're coming to get our check.
Black first, my brothers and my sisters, welcome to the Afro Elite YouTube channel. I'm your host, Afro Elite. Brothers and sisters, we are back with our good brother, Cool Colas, and we are going to be discussing his new book. The newest book is flying off the shelves. He's done many book sales about it, and we're going to really break down the material that's in the book, the reasoning behind the book, the importance of the book, and we're going to break down everything so you guys have an understanding of why you need to get a copy of this man's book. All right. So without any further ado, brother Cool Colas, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. How you doing, Afro?
I'm good. Thank you. I appreciate you coming back. We've done content before. This is a couple of times. The last time we did a video collab together, we were really discussing education, and this kind of segues into today's collab. This kind of segues into today's topic as far as the book. So from what I understand, this is your second book, correct?
That's right.
So before we get into the second book, let me ask, there is a link between the first book and the second book, or are these two completely different subjects?
They're completely different. My first book actually is a fiction book. This one is nonfiction. So with a lot of the books that I'm writing, I'm actually going to be doing a little bit of both.
Okay. Well, that's good. So the book, I've seen your Instagram. I've seen you at book sales and everything. The book is doing very well. The book is doing good. And so I'm happy about that. So what this brother does, so the audience knows, what this brother does is he really breaks down the subconscious and kind of subliminal, I should say, layers, the racial subliminal layers between a lot of things in media, whether that's fiction, whether that's nonfiction, whether that's a TV show, whether that's a comic book, whether that's a video game, whether that's a cartoon or a movie, and all of these things, because a lot of what is done under the system of white supremacy is done to indoctrinate you and have you going along with their system. So they can't put it on a chalkboard and write it down and say, this is what you have to believe. You have to subconsciously believe that the black man, it needs to be the sidekick to a white man. They can't tell you that blatantly, but they put it in entertainment to psychologically program a lot of our people. And this is what our brother fights against in his education, with his knowledge and his reviews on things. So this is what a lot of the content in the book is about. So let me ask you, so the audience can get a good understanding of who you are as an individual.
Most definitely.
What got you even started on this type of path where you're even discussing these subjects or making these videos and even have an interest for this type of stuff? What got you on that path?
Most definitely. So the main thing that got me on this path, bro, is the fact that I've been experiencing racism pretty much since I was 11 years old, or at least that's as far back as I can kind of remember. And so I got to a point in my life where I really wanted to do something about it, and I wanted to kind of be a change. And what I noticed is that for a lot of people like me, so the blurs, like the black nerds, we use the things that we enjoy as a form of escapism, whether we realize it or whether we don't. So what I noticed is that because we use it as escapism, we're thinking that it's all the racism that we face, whether we go to work, whether we go to school, whether we are in the grocery store, wherever it may be, we think that we can escape it by going home, watching television, looking at movies, playing video games, that type of thing. And what I noticed was that this was also happening in that space as well, too, which tells you that white supremacy dominates even in the entertainment sector. So at a certain point, when I started posting on social media, which was like 2020, 2021, like actually putting my stuff out there, I started off by just trying to give like black people a voice. But then I thought about it and I'm like, there's a lot of stuff that I watch and that I see where there's a lot of issues. And I don't really think I was telling my full self. you know, although I had all these ideals. So at a certain point, I was like, well, I can still talk about the things that, you know, I want to do and, you know, still give Black people a voice, but just in a different way. So for me, I started kind of looking at some of the TV shows that I like a lot of the superhero shows. And I started noticing a lot of the tropes. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go on Instagram and I'm going to start talking about all these different things. And eventually what I did was I wrote this book to make it an extension of the stuff that I was talking about on social media, because I noticed that I started getting a lot more attention to, even when I started talking about the things that I had noticed. So that was the origin, and that's kind of how we got here.
Okay. Even though I'm very sure the audience is probably aware of it, can you explain what a blurred is?
Yeah, most definitely. So a blurred is a Black nerd. But the thing about blurreddom versus nerddom is that it's a cultural experience. So when we talk about blurs, we're talking about an experience that's different from the classic white nerdiness that is really corny, and that, you know, they make a lot of jokes and they say a lot of things that really aren't all that understandable or relatable. But see, being a blurred is an experience where you actually can enjoy a lot of the whimsical things, like the video games, the TV shows, those types of things. You enjoy comics, but you also are in tune with Black culture at the same time. So it's really taking those two things and making your own thing out of it.
Okay. Now, on your videos, you said you were doing videos from like 2020, 2021, a few years before you started making it. You must have got a lot of probably the here and there, but a lot of like pushback against some of the stuff. So what was that like? I know when you first start making videos, you can just expect, just because of the fact that this is a racial situation or a racial topic, that eventually as you grow that you'll receive some pushback. But what was the first type of pushback that you were receiving? Like the first wave of wow, they're really like pushing back against this.
Yeah, most definitely. And and I still get a lot of that pushback even today. But I would say that the biggest things that I saw is that people would push back whenever I would talk about you know, just anti-Blackness in general, because they would think that I was complaining. That was one thing that I would get a lot. It's like, where your solutions at? I think I told you about the whole solution Sambo trope. There was that going on. Another thing that I kept getting quite a bit is anytime I would talk about anything that was related to the LGBT community, I would get pushed back on that. Specifically how it affected Black people, right? And then the other thing that I would get a lot of pushback on was this idea that I sounded negative by the things that I was talking about. So a lot of people would be very frustrated because they thought that I was being overly critical about something that I just think people just simply weren't pointing out. So I used to kind of get that a lot. And to be honest, it kind of was like equal between like suspected white supremacists coming on and saying certain things. And then, like, you know, you had your Sambo class that would come on and they would kind of put their 2 cents in. It was kind of equal. But like, for the most part, it was that it sounded too negative, or they didn't like the LGBT thing. Lately, it's been more of that shea butter Samba class. They don't like when I criticize, you know, the way that Black women are portrayed and stuff like that. And again, like, just the fact that I talk about like anti-Blackness in general. People are like, well, everybody already knows this. So what's the solution? So I get that a lot too.
Okay. Well, you make a lot of content and you speak on a lot of different subjects as far as entertainment goes. Before we get into the book, let me ask you some more questions. Do you, and I know you speak on reality and then fiction.
Yep.
I know you speak on, you know, a Marvel movie or a Marvel TV series, and then you speak on maybe a Tyler Perry movie or a real life, kind of like a drama movie or a drama series or anything. Do you notice any difference in reception by your audience, or even people who are not your, you know, base audience, when you do fiction versus nonfiction? Is there like more pushback for fiction or more pushback for nonfiction?
I think the pushback is pretty even all over the board, to be honest with you. Reason why I say that is I think that the level of pushback is the same, but the type of pushback might be different. So let me explain what I mean by that. If I talk about like a comic TV show or that type of thing, I notice that the type of pushback I get are usually from that intersectional crowd, A lot of them get frustrated because too many of them are so quick to kind of buck dance for opportunities, like with the dominant society. A lot of them kind of like to get in good. So when I talk about, you know, the ways Black people are portrayed, they're like, well, at least Black people kind of got an opportunity and all this other stuff. And it's really not as bad as you're trying to make it seem like, because they're trying to dumb down like the racial elements that I'm talking about. When I talk about more realistic type of things, like, you know, like the Tyler Perry movies and stuff like that, the most of the pushback, I'll be honest with you, I get is from the Shea Butter Samba class, because a lot of them get upset because I talk about how, and I noticed this on Tyler Perry movies and also noticed on a lot of the Black movies that we used to watch back in the day. What they typically do is they make it seem like anytime they make the Black man a villain, it's really a Black woman. Anytime they make a Black woman the villain, it's really the white supremacist. So a lot of people kind of get upset about me giving accountability to either Black women or the way that Black women are portrayed. And ultimately, I think what they miss, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, is that it's not an attack necessarily on the people outside of them being complicit. It's an attack on the dominant society puppeteering all of these different things. And I've been saying that.
Okay. Do you feel as if the fiction versus nonfiction, as far as the subliminal programming and indoctrination, do you feel like that's equally as damaging, or do you feel like the fictional is kind of more damaging, or the nonfictional is more damaging?
I think that I would call them probably equally damaging, but they just have a different orientation once again. What I mean by that is a lot of the things that they do in the kind of like fiction stuff, especially if it's really cartoony, is allegorical. Like, you know, they'll put something in a cartoon, or they'll put something onto a character that maybe has something to do with Black people, and you just really don't see it. There'll be like a lot of like anti-Black things they'll do. But when it comes to like a lot of the nonfiction stuff, I think for people who that's more relatable to, when you're not a nerd, you know, you're not a Black nerd or that type of thing, I think that it can bring a different type of audience, right? So I don't think it's as allegorical. Like, there can be allegories, don't get me wrong, but it's not quite as allegorical. So I just think it's just a different way they kind of maybe go about it when they're portraying these different messages. But as far as being damaging, indoctrination is pretty much indoctrination, no matter how you swing it. I just think it takes on different forms.
Okay. I would agree. And you seem very well informed. Of course, doing this for the course of what, like 3-4 years.
Yeah.
You know, you were probably very informed prior to you making any content, but people have to understand, when you start making content, that means you really dive into it on a much deeper level than just I just kind of noticed this. You know, you're actually looking and trying to notice a lot of these things. So let's get into the book. How many chapters are in this book?
So this book has 10 chapters.
Okay. 10 chapters. So I know there's a lot of things in a book. You can't put every single thing you think about in the book. You know, so in this book specifies, correct me if I'm wrong, this book specifies really on a lot of the tropes that a lot of Black people might miss, that kind of get subliminally inputted in their mind if they're, you know, late at night, kind of got off work, watching a movie, and they're just kind of relaxing, and they're seeing something and they're not really noticing the indoctrination. So this book takes some of the biggest tropes in a lot of fiction, whether that's not a lot of media, whether that's nonfiction or fiction. And it puts it together so that way you can understand the different tropes, as far as the shea butter class, or how Black women are portrayed. Because we're not trying to, this isn't like a incel anti-Black woman thing at all, to any degree, but this is just really in defense of Black women, when you actually understand that we're trying to talk about an accurate and positive representation, or the Black man with a father figure of the white man father figure. Okay. And I think one of the most notable situations like this was actually a white woman mother figure in The Blind Side.
Yep.
You know, and I know this book talks about that, the kind of white parental figure to a black person, in particular a black man. So what would you say is your take on that?
So as far as my take on the scenario you described, first of all, you know, that is white saviorism for sure. And like, I do break that down in the book, so that is accurate what you had said. And I think from a bigger scope, you were asking about like all of the tropes and things like that that I discussed. So it's actually like an amalgamation of two different things. Like, I take the main tropes that people know about, so you know, typical race swaps and stuff like that, and just like, you know, just basic racism, tokenism. I talk about all those things, but I also make it so that I talk about the tropes that I made up myself as well too. Well, not the tropes itself, but the pattern that I see. So what I try to get people to understand is the psychology of the tropes that you see, not just identifying them, but understanding why they happen. And what I want to do is I want to make it so that people know that there are very hidden tropes. There's different levels to it, right? There's tropes that are very noticeable, things that you can visibly see, nobody would dispute. Like, for example, I think you brought this up a little bit earlier. You see a white dude and he always has a black sidekick, and you see that a lot in these superhero TV shows. Those types of things get talked about. But I also talk about things that I have seen that typically aren't really noticeable, but are still a thing that people would go and they would say, oh, you're nitpicking at that. And it's like, no, I'm not nitpicking. I'm making it clear that there are hidden ways that you're being indoctrinated to see yourself, and we don't have to be represented this way. So to answer your question, yes, it's a mix. The other thing that I do is I also talk about and describe the way that people are impacted, like the types of people. So one of the things I talked about even earlier today was solution samboism. So I even go into like not just the tropes, but like the types of people that result from the tropes. Like so for example, you see a solution sambo is somebody who, if they see somebody talking about anti-blackness like me or you, like we do on our platforms, they're like, where are your solutions at? We've been hearing this for the past I don't know how many years. You hear that shit. The reality is that those people aren't really looking for solutions. They're just trying to look for attention, and they believe that they will get attention and maybe go viral if they kind of hit a cool one-liner and somebody gives them hundreds of likes for it. Those are the types of people who kind of get into our mix. So I'm bringing that up to say that I describe these types of things in the book because I want you to understand the type of people that get developed even from absorbing these and being indoctrinated by the stuff that they see.
That's pretty interesting. That's really good. Because a lot of people understand the very, very blatant, obvious tropes. And then, like you said, there's a lot of tropes that are so kind of disguised in a way, you almost don't notice them. And then you said that there are a result of tropes. And I've gotten that a lot for years. Like, oh, you're talking about the same thing everybody knows about, you know. You don't really have a real solution or whatever, or what are we going to do about it? Kind of people really trying to be a contrarian, people really trying to push back against it, but what you're saying is correct. So it's almost in a sense a way to try to delegitimize what you're talking about by saying that, okay, you're just talking and that's just no action to it. So let me ask, how many tropes would you say are actually in or let me ask a better question. How many tropes did you, as you've been developing your expertise on this subject, how many tropes have you been able to kind of formulate and notice the pattern and develop yourself that hasn't been like blatantly obvious for many years? Like you said, the solution sambo.
Yes, man, that's a great question. And the reason why I'm like, I got a little taken aback is because I'm like, man, I don't think I ever really counted. But if I had to like put a number on it, I probably would say maybe somewhere around 30.
Oh, wow.
30-ish. And I mean, like, if we include sub-tropes, it's probably upwards of that. Because I also break that down as well, too. You don't just have tropes, you have agendas and you also have like subtropes as well too. And the
Okay.
reason why I say I use the term subtrope instead of trope is because there are sometimes subcategories within a trope that is actually made. And they may have a similar look to that same trope heading, but then they may have a different mission. So what they're trying to indoctrinate you on and what they're trying to change up is actually different from something else that's in that same trope category. So I would probably say upwards of 30 if you include subtropes. But like I said, I haven't really counted for real, so I'm definitely gonna have to get back to you on a more accurate number.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the biggest tropes, that you've kind of formulated and you've discovered? I was not like formulating because you didn't create them, but you discovered these tropes and you've actually been able to put a label on it.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about an agenda more than a trope on that one, because that's a great question. Okay. One agenda that I've been seeing quite a bit when it comes to entertainment is what I would call cultural repackaging. And that's basically where they take some element of Black history, whether it's from our lineage, whether it's from Africa, or whether it's from the Caribbeans or whatever. And they basically put it into their lore, and they try to make it seem like it was original when really they scalped it. So what they'll do, for example, is they'll take some element of Blackness and then they'll create an entire white character out of that one piece of thing that they scalped from us and then call it original. And then sometimes what they do is this thing called reverse repackaging, where then they will then race swap that character that was white and then turn them Black. I've seen that quite a bit, especially with, I'll give you an example. The Superman character. Superman has so many rips from Black culture, it's not even funny. Superman has been taken from, like if you look at Egyptian culture, there's Ra. He the Egyptian god Ra. He has a sun god on his planet called Ra-O, which is similar to Ra. He's got a pyramid on his chest, and the S is supposed to be like a snake. The thing on his chest, the triangle is like a pyramid. He also has a Hebrew name. And then the other thing too is the origin of the character actually came from some white dudes who were making a comic about Jesse Owens, who was a Black American track runner. So like they actually have taken things from Black people all over and have made characters out of that. Superman is not the only character, because the same is true for SpiderMan, the same is true for Batman, the same is true for Wonder Woman. I could keep going on. The point I'm trying to make though is that like that's one of the biggest things that I see.
I'm very aware of Wonder Woman, because years ago I saw a video about the Amazon and everything like that, and she's supposed to be this Amazonian warrior or princess actually, and which is kind of based off of a real society. So I was understanding that. And I think Superman, you said Ra. I think that's either his like Kryptonian name or his dad's name or something like that.
That's right.
So that's actually very interesting. I remember also, now that you bring this up, I remember when me, you, and our good brother Torian Rain, when we did a video, or it was a podcast, and we were discussing Black Panther, and then we were also discussing DC's movie Blue Beetle. And you were going into how a lot of the Blue Beetle, who is a DC character, who's actually in the comics and the movies, Hispanic, a young Hispanic male, he takes a lot from Black and African culture. There's a lot of that lore and cultural roots in that character. So that's actually very interesting thing. Like taking, like, you don't want to bring up a Black person, but you like the things about Black people and Black history and Black culture, I think a lot of people recognize that entertainment has done this oftentimes a lot. That's why a lot of people would say like, oh, he's not Black, but he's kind of like the Black character in this, like, especially if a character's blue, or if the character's green, if the character's like a non-human color, then that would be the designated Black character of the cartoon or of the show.
Yep.
You know,
What you're talking about is the pseudo black trope. So that's the trope I came up with as well too. The pseudo black trope is where you see a character that allegorically resembles somebody who is black in some way, whether it's an essence, whether it's in actual physical features or that type of thing, or something that they do. But they are either animalistic, they're an alien, or there's some type of like presence that just seems black. So good examples of that would be like Knuckles the Echidna from Sonic the Hedgehog, or Piccolo from Dragon Ball Z, or Martian Manhunter from DC. Those types of characters are, there's a black essence to them. Something about them feels black, although they appear as aliens and animals. So yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So why in that trope, why do they do that instead of not putting an actual black person in that role?
Yeah, and that, so there's a couple reasons why they do it. One of the reasons why they do it is because they're not trying to give full shine to black people. So it's a way to give black people something to hold on to, because they've always been given us scraps, but without actually giving them the shine that they deserve, because they know that if they give us too much shine, then it's going to be seen as a fully black thing. They just want to give diversity and some type of representation, so they take credit, and they're not seen as racist because they portrayed us, but they're not really trying to show our faces. So that's one reason. The other thing that they do too is they use these characters sometimes to disrespect us as well too, because notice that a lot of times, even when you see these characters that are black feeling, but they're an animal or an alien, notice that they're never really like the main character. They're always like kind of a side character. They're always kind of getting pushed around or tossed around, or they're just not given the shine like the main person is. Matter of fact, I actually read somewhere, I don't remember the article, so I don't want to, get it totally wrong, but there was an article I read where people were saying that with the Knuckles character, they kind of dumbed him down because they felt like he was going to outshine Sonic the Hedgehog as a character. And if you look at Knuckles, he has so many things that make him seem black. Like, first of all, if you look at his hair, he looks like he has the locks. If you look at his feet, he has shoes that are red, yellow, and green. It's kind of like a Rastafarian flag, like Jamaican. And then you have the fact that he has a lot of tribal and ancestral ties, kind of like foundational Black Americans do. If you look at all the other echidnas in his family, even if you go back to the comics, like, because I was a big Sonic the Hedgehog comic fan, a lot of them are really like tribal looking, like they, represented natives to a land. So that's why I say, like, if you look at Knuckles, another thing too, he raps in like some of his songs, like in the like when they do theme songs in some of the games. So I'm looking at that and I'm like, there's no way they're not trying to make reference to somebody who is black. And some of these creators will even come out and say, yeah, this was supposed to represent an African American. So like it's definitely a thing, man.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Yep.
That's very interesting. I'm glad you broke that down, because a lot of people feel that, and people have always kind of said that, especially I know a lot about Piccolo in particular. Piccolo's kind of like the black people of the black guy in Dragon Ball. He wears a turban and everything like that. He kind of has a deeper bass to his voice than all of the other characters do. He's taller than everybody else. So these are kind of like little characteristics that people would associate with a black man, So that's very interesting that you broke that down. Another thing that I think is very relevant today is I'm sure you are aware of how Marvel is doing its thing and DC is doing its thing as far as making movies and media and stuff. And one of the things that is causing a lot of controversy is what I know you call race swapping, which I think is another trope that you labeled and kind of put together. So can you give an example of that? I was going to give it, but I think you would be best to give that.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so here's the thing. I kind of want to go back a little bit because race swap, in my opinion, because I think people get this confused, I believe is a sub-trope, not a trope. Let me explain what I mean. I made up a term called the black carbon copy trope. And race swap is one of the sub-tropes that falls underneath this. But there are two things. You have the race swap sub-trope, and the other one's called mantle pass sub-trope. So there's two different things that go on, and people usually conflate them. So I'll explain what I mean by that. When we talk about race swaps, we talk about like a character that is presentably white as the original character, and they get turned into a black character with all of the phenotypical things, but nothing else changes. The name don't change, the story don't change, the clothing and things like that that they wear, none of that stuff changes. The only thing that changes literally is the racial phenotype in their race. But a mantle pass is slightly different. Well, it's actually very different. I ain't gonna dumb it down.
Can you give an example of what you just said?
Yes, yeah, sure. So an example of a race swap would be like the Little Mermaid. So they had Ariel, and she was white, and then like they did this movie with Halle Bailey, and she was black all of a sudden. That's a race swap.
And absolutely nothing else about the character or her origin change. It's the same character, Ariel.
Correct.
Same story. Okay. All right.
Correct. 100% the same. And they've done that quite a bit. They've done it on what else? They did it on the show The Flash as well too, with the Wally West character. Wally West was originally known to be a white speedster, and now he's black on The Flash. I could keep going. DC and Marvel tend to do that quite a bit. They do it a lot with villains and heroes. If you look at like the mantle pass, though, that's slightly different. I think some people call this a race swap too. And here's the reason why I wanted to bring this up. They actually go a little more advanced with this subtrope, because they don't just change the phenotype. They also change like the story, the name, and they change other things. But the shell of the character is the same as another character that was originally presented as white. So I'm gonna give you an example of that. So look at Miles Morales. He's the perfect example. Miles Morales he's been made to seem different than Spider-Man, but no one could ever deny that the origins of this character started from looking at Spider-Man, meaning like Peter Parker Spider-Man, meaning he is a mantle pass. In other words, and people get this confused too. They take me literally, but I'm telling you, I mean literally and figuratively that, it's a mantle pass. So not even like these two characters met, they passed the thing down to this other person, but even the creators actually passed the moniker of this type of character to somebody else who is of a different race, that being white to black, which is typically the thing that they do. So in the case of Miles Morales, the shell of him is like Spider-Man, but they differentiated him in so many different ways that they want to make him seem like he's different, but he wasn't an original character is what I mean.
Okay. So essentially, just to put it in my words, like asking for the sake of the audience, that's like a character you having let's use Spider-Man for example. Spider-Man, Peter Parker Spider-Man is the base character, and Miles Morales is the character that is modeled after the base character.
You got it.
Of course, you might have different types of jokes or different type of surrounding character or supporting character cast system, but the kind of like the base character is almost like a variant of the base character, where the villains are similar, the issues are kind of similar, the powers are kind of similar, his fighting is kind of similar, everything is kind of similar. And even in the story, in the story where Miles Morales actually becomes Spider-Man, he actually looked up to Spider-Man, the Peter Parker Spider-Man. It's not like there was no Spider-Man, but there was a Peter Parker Spider-Man that Miles looked up to. So Miles, even in the comics, does look at Spider-Man as like an older brother type of figure, like a role model type of figure. So even in the character, so we're not just making this up, or you're not just making it up. No. Even in the actual fiction character, Miles does mimic Spider-Man as close as he could due to his respect and admiration for Peter Parker.
Right. That's absolutely right. And that's absolutely what I was articulating. They model a black character after a white character, and that's why I said the shell of the character is the same. So it's like he's still like some form of Spider-Man. Like you saying variant actually was a perfect way to describe it, like almost like a different version of this character, but it's still that moniker. It's like another example too would be like a Green Lantern. If you look at like the old school comics, everybody knew that the Green Lantern in the comics was Hal Jordan, which was a white boy. But then when you watch Justice League, the TV series, you see there's a Green Lantern that's part of the Justice League, and all of a sudden it's John Stewart. And John Stewart and Hal Jordan look totally different. Not even just by name and by them, one being white, one being black. I mean, physically, you can see that John Stewart is a real diesel dude, whereas Hal Jordan, it's not that he's out of shape, but he don't look like John Stewart. So you can just tell that they are taking a character and they're modeling them after the shell of a character that was originally white. And I'm doing that for a reason, bro. Like I'm doing this because of the fact, when I say originally white, because sometimes, but even those characters are scalped, like I talked about earlier. Spider-Man is one of those scalped characters that was scalped from black origins. So now they're going back and they're now saying that, oh, this is the original white character, and now we're turning them black again, which again is the reverse scalping that I talked about.
Okay. So how would what before we continue, what are like some of the scout characters we discussed Spider-Man and even Blue Beetle. What would the scout character be with Spider-Man?
Spider-Man is based off of Anansi. The spider, the Ghanaian spider god, or no, deity. He was like a deity, and he was supposed to be known as like a trickster type of god, and he was based on like the spider-esque type of character, but it was based off of Ghanaian mythology. So they basically took the Spider-Man character and made it based off of that. And there's origins to actually support this as well too. If you even in the characters that they create in Marvel. Matter of fact, there was actually a black Spider-Man. I'm going to put that in quotations too, before they actually had Miles Morales. And I think he was called like a Nazi, I believe as well too. And it was a black dude and he had spider powers like Spider-Man did in the actual Marvel comics. So this is how you know that they're actually studying our like a lot of like black people all over before they actually turn them into characters. And I think what's his name? I think Tariq actually talked about this before as well too. How like they like a lot of Stan Lee and a lot of them they like to study like black history or African history and then take it and then create characters out of it. Another example I wanted to bring up as well too, and I want to bring this up because I actually just watched this movie, Deadpool and Wolverine. The Wolverine character is also taken from our origins as well too. If you look, because with Wolverine, they actually have a character there who is, I believe he was based off of, his name was Shango, and he was like the god of like ironworks. And so if you look at Wolverine, he has like the three claws, and then Shango has like the machetes, and it's like three of them basically. And so they actually have like there's a god in I guess like well let me take it back. There's a character in the Marvel series that was like a mentor to Wolverine, and I believe his name was Shango as well too. And he actually mentored him. They actually named him Shango as if like not even to change up the name or anything based off of that god. And if you look it up, you can find it anywhere.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh wow, that's that's really deep.
Yep.
And this goes to show how deep and enriched our history is, our roots are with everything, you know, as far as the inventions, the society, even the entertainment. Even when you don't think that this is kind of black entertainment, it is based off of blackness where this entertainment spurs from, you know, whether that's Deadpool, Wolverine, Spider-Man, Superman, all of these other comic book situations and characters and things.
Yep.
Now, I'm sure that you get a lot of pushback. Because people are like, well, why can't you just enjoy it? Why do you always have to bring it up? Some people want to live in denial.
Yep.
Some people want to live in denial, and that's a sad truth and everything. So for the people who want to learn, I think this is a good way. A book is a really good way because it really does filter out all of the arguments that you're gonna get. You just get the straight, pure knowledge, you know, of the situation. I know a lot of people, and we were just talking about mantle passing. There's a movie coming out next year called Captain America. I think the Brave World, Captain America, the Brave World, where Captain America, Steve Rogers, a white man, he passes in the Avengers Endgame movie. He passes his shield, essentially his mantle, to his friend who was previously his sidekick, Sam Wilson, who's the Falcon. And then the Falcon now becomes the new Captain America because Steve Rogers is not Captain America anymore. So I think that's another great example of mantle passing right there. Now,
it is. Afro, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just want to say something real quick. I want to correct something that I did a second ago. I said that the god that they modeled Wolverine after was Shango. His name actually was Ogun. So I apologize about that. Okay. But Ogun was actually the person they modeled him after, and then Ogun actually was a character that was named in the Marvel comics who happened to be the mentor of Wolverine. So I take that back.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Anyway. Well, y'all look up Ogun. So it's been a lot of pushback, a lot of pushback, and there's a lot of angry. I was looking through the comments of like the early, when they post the pictures and stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of angry white people like, oh my God, this is woke. I hate this so much. Why is everything got to be black? So to you, even though you don't really want, because I don't think anybody really wanted or asked any of us as foundational Black Americans, we didn't really ask to be all like, well, we want a black Captain America, and now we want a black Superman, and now we don't really ask for that. It's kind of just like, it's almost something that a lot of us kind of don't want, to be very honest. But why do you think a lot of the dominant society gets upset about it?
You mean about like the appearance of like kind of the like our people, like diversity?
Yeah, because in my opinion, and I'm asking you because you're the one who studies this subject. In my opinion, there was not as much pushback when it came to black characters in fiction as there are now. Now, if a black character is in any movie, all of a sudden they're pulling their hair out and they're screaming, oh, this is woke, this is anti-white. But before, they could kind of just like let it slide. For instance, and I'm going to give an example, Jon Stewart being the Green Lantern in the cartoons. When Jon Stewart was not like I'm gonna do the quote thing, was not the comic book Green Lantern before. But in the cartoon adaptation, now he's the Black Green Lantern, and that didn't really get a lot of pushback. But now all of a sudden there's this real, very fragile and sensitive wave of the dominant society when it comes to any representation of black people fiction.
Yep, I can answer that. And I think it's actually it's a great question, but it's a loaded question, and I'm gonna try to explain it as much as possible. What I think is going on is that.
Hold on, can you give me 1 second? Can you give me?
Yeah,
you're
good. You're good. So with the question that you asked, now it's very loaded, but I'm going to try to answer it as much as possible because it is very loaded. It's a great question, but it's a loaded answer to that question. So there's two things going on. The first thing that is going on is because we have social media, we're now seeing the racism that I think was always there. And now I think that the dominant society is feeling like there's more of an uprising of black content that is being portrayed. So now they're vocalizing it more. Whereas if they saw maybe hints of it here or there, it probably wasn't as much of an issue, or they didn't believe it was as much of an issue. But now that we see more of it, now it's a thing that they're going to be upset about. So there's that going on. So there's it's like more of like social media mixed with the fact that they're seeing more of it. So they're starting to be concerned that this is going to be a habit that's going to continue. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I think is happening is what I would call the both sides agenda. So let me explain what that is. The both sides agenda is when the dominant society plays both sides. So they play oppressor, but they also play supporter. So this is something that happens very frequently as well too. You ever see like in the news whenever they talk about how there's like an uprising of somebody getting mad because black people are being, or either black people or black products are being shown, like for example, like how let me say a better example actually, because I don't even want to talk about I don't want to go outside of media. So you know how like you'll have a character that is historically white, and then like they'll make them black, they'll race swap them, and then you'll have these racist white nerds who get really upset kind of about what they see. So that's a both sides narrative, because most people are going to focus on the fact that there was a racist white nerd who got upset at what they saw. But what they don't focus on is that the person who portrayed this black character and race swapped them is equally as guilty, if not more guilty. Because what they're really trying to do is they're trying to portray diversity so that they can cover their asses, so they don't look like they're racist, because they now portrayed black people. And then what they do is they do it lazily, so they're not really giving us originality or original shine. So anything that we do is attached to them because it's attached to original character if it's race swapped. The other reason why they do that is because they know that there's these blatantly racist white nerds that are out there that are going to react. And if they defend this black person who has been portrayed, this black character that's been portrayed, then they're going to look like a company or a group of people who black people could see as allies, when ultimately they are just trying to exploit and profit off of the black image and the black face. Reason why I kind of pulled it back into media is because it actually goes outside of media. And that's one of the things I talk about in the book, is how these media things actually happen in real life in other areas of activity. Like Neely Fuller Jr. has said, white supremacy dominates all areas of activity. But going back, when it comes to media representation, sometimes you get that because what the dominant society does on the quote unquote supporter side is they will showcase when the really racist white nerds will whine and bitch about seeing us, but they will kind of not really say too much about what they're doing and the way that they are kind of exploiting us in a tokenism type of way.
Okay. The token, and it's good you bring that up. The token is another trope. And everybody kind of knows about like that one black friend, you know what I'm saying, who hangs around a group of non-black people and be all like, no, I have a black friend, his name is Carl over there, you know.
Yeah.
And the token black friend tends to act like the Carlton Banks from The Fresh Prince. Kind of very disconnected from black society, disconnected from black culture, very critical of other black people, you know, and almost has a very a nasty attitude to other black people, a very uppity attitude to other black people. And this can be a male or a female. You know, and you explain this in comic books, right? Or not more so comic books, more so media. Right? So can you give an example of that?
Definitely. One place that I see a lot of tokenism is in a trope, like, because tokenism can exist in a lot of different places and in a lot of different tropes. But one trope that I've seen it quite a bit in is what I would call the black tech support trope. Now that's me being kind of like, I wouldn't call it sarcastic, but cynical, tongue in cheek about talking about black geeks. So what I would call bleaks. So sometimes in these shows, they have it where they have a character who is a black nerd or a black geek, like I said, and all they do is tinker around with computers and shit like that. And they're usually like a sidekick and that type of thing. What they ultimately like to do with these characters is make it seem like they're kind of giving them some type of honor by saying, oh, this person is smart because look at them. They're able to work on computers and things like that. But ultimately, although it's supposed to show some type of representation of black people being intelligent, it's kind of a backhanded compliment, because what they do is they put them in a lot of these superhero shows where you'll have this white character who is really, you know, is all brawn, is a great superhero, strong, charismatic, masculine, that type of thing. So in this case, I'm obviously talking about a black male geek. But anyway, what they typically do is they portray this character in order to make it seem like they're saying, hey, we're not a monolith because look at us, we can be smart geeks. But they're also making it seem like this person's weak and feeble, and their superpower is them being able to tinker with electronics. But I do want to add another thing onto that too. These types of tokenistic characters, they love to add other tropes onto a character. So sometimes what they like to do is they like to combine tropes onto one character. Miles Morales was an example of this, but for sakes of staying on topic, let's go back to what I said. If you look at the black tech support trope, a lot of times when they make these black geeks, a lot of times they make them LGBT or they put them in an interracial relationship. So they disconnect them further from blackness as well too. And you can look on certain shows like a lot of those Arrowverse shows like Batwoman, they did that because Batwoman had Luke Fox. Then they put all of Luke Fox's love interest, or what it seemed like were going to be his love interest. None of them were black. If they did the same thing with Chester on The Flash, all of his love interests were, or his only love interest was non-black as well too. So they tend to do this as somewhat of a trend.
Okay. I noticed a lot of and a lot of media nowadays. Speaking of, and I'm glad that you brought this up because this actually does segue us into this subject, I think, very well. A lot of media nowadays, when it comes to fiction and nonfiction, but particular, I see a lot in fiction, does a lot of interracial relationships. That's almost all you see of any black relationship is almost interracial. And it's a spike, and this is what I've noticed, it's a spike in not just a black man and a white woman. A lot of interracial relationships you see in fiction, now you see of a black woman and a white man.
Yep.
So there's a big kind of agenda. I mean, you can only notice things happening over and over and over again before you say that this is a deliberate action.
Yep.
You know, sometimes they would even change a character's race so they can be in an interracial relationship. So why do you think, what is this big push about the interracial relationship? Why can't they just have a black couple be a black couple? Why can't a black character be with another black character?
They tend to not show that for multiple reasons, but the couple reasons I believe that they're doing that, one is because, again, that is a way to put black people on. If they show black and black relationships, they know we're going to want to get together with each other. And they know that kids are impressionable. So when black kids see people who look like them getting with other people who look like them, they are essentially going to emulate that as they grow up. Like, you know how when we grow up in a certain environment, we like a certain thing. They're basically trying to instruct your kids on how you're supposed to view that. So if they show very minimal black to black relationships, like the nuclear black family, then they're seldom going to desire that. So that's one thing that I see. The other thing that I see, and the reason why I think that they do this as well too, is because ultimately they believe that if they can have us be in interracial relationships and that type of thing as well too, they believe that they can convince black people love can conquer all when it comes to the whole racism type of thing. So sometimes their thing is, well, you know, look at this person, they're dating somebody interracially, so it must, you know, mean that it doesn't matter about the color of your skin. It's just all about like love, when racism is a real thing. And we all know that you can still be racist and be with a black person. That's a very common thing, right? The other thing that I would say too is that, and I would call this trope something specifically, I would call it the swirling agenda. Or the swirling trope. I would call it the swirling trope because it's this idea of using interracial relationships in a manipulative way to negatively impact black people. Because I've said this before, I'm pro-black. I believe in black relationships and black people being together and whatnot. If you decide you want to date interracially, cool. It doesn't make you pro-black, but cool. But don't use that relationship to do disrespectful or harmful things to black society. And that's exactly what they do when they portray these relationships. And when we say that, we don't just mean black and white. We mean black and anybody else but black.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of on like a keep it to yourself, because I noticed and a lot of these interracial relationships, a lot of these people, you can kind of tell, and I don't want to diverge too much off subject, but you can a lot of times tell that a lot of them are trying to almost like stick it to the opposite sex in their race. They're trying to stick it to the opposite side. So you'll see like for instance, if a black man is with a white or an Asian woman and he's all like, oh my God, these are some of the most beautiful, submissive, friendly women who cook and clean and they love you and they're loyal. Like they're doing it almost in a way to, I don't even like this as much as I like to get at, like kind of stick it to black women. And then you see that in vice versa with the black women being all like, oh my God, the white man is such a great protector and provider, in a way that kind of stick it to black men. So you can tell it's a lot of them are really damaged in that way.
Ultimately that's actually what swirling is. That's absolutely what it is. It's using it to demonize your same race. And in terms of black people, that's really, what they're trying to do. I've seen that quite often as well too. And it's like a lot of the people who kind of get into those relationships, you have to kind of sit back and think, you have to be careful when you date somebody who is not black as a black person, because there's a lot of us brothers and sisters both who actually come up dead or something bad happens to us because of the relationship that we had. We've seen this pattern so many times, right? Yes. So it's like you may have been encountering certain black women who may have had an attitude or whatever your issue was, but your alternative is to go with a woman who doesn't understand your culture and could possibly have you floating somewhere in a river. Instead of like going after an actual black woman who likes you for you. Like, that's my problem with that. Now, the one thing that I want to say, though, going back to the interracial thing that I think happens quite a bit, especially in media, is I see this kind of race play shit kind of go on sometimes as well, too. And I've seen the race play thing go on, especially in control opposition tropes. And this is one thing you asked me to talk about, is like tropes I see that are pretty harmful, that actually show up a lot. Controlled opposition is one of them. That's when they want to present this image of this idea of being codified, or this thing about being, as they like to say, woke. I don't like using that term because of how it's been thrown around too much, but like woke. And ultimately, they are also doing anti-black things in the background. So let me give you an example of that. If you look at movies like The Hate U Give, if you look at stuff like Dear White People, if you look at shows like Queen Sugar, they all show that type of narrative where you have somebody who's black, who's real pro-black, and is usually a black woman. And she is with a white dude, or she's LGBT, or that type of thing. And usually what I notice too is that although they're pro-black appearing, a lot of times they actually like make it so that the black man is actually the villain in a lot of these flicks. And I don't know, that's a pattern that I've been seeing. And ultimately, I've also noticed that they put these pro-black characters a lot of times with not even like white people who may be seen as allies, but it's more so white people who actually are like suspected white supremacists, and they'll put them in relationships and they'll have them conflict and fight. And then at some point they'll end up having sex. That's happened in a couple different shows as well too. And that's why I said there's some race play stuff going on, because ultimately what they're doing is they're trying to create a facade by having this person who's real pro-black seeming. They're talking about how much they hate white people. They can't stand them, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And they end up having sex with them.
Yeah. I've noticed that a lot. I have seen The Hate U Give, and I have seen Dear White People. And at first I'm thinking like, okay, this is I kind of like where this is going. I do notice that a lot when it comes to media, a lot. Now they're really trying to make the pro-blackness be women. Yeah. Don't tend to see a pro-black man in media. At least you don't see the pro-black man be the main character in media. The main pro-black or the most pro-black character in whatever type of media, whatever type of show, tends to be the woman. And this isn't to shade black women, but this is subliminal doctrination. This is kind of programming is what they're doing, because they're trying to really say, in my opinion, and then I can ask you, they're really trying to say that kind of like women lead the community in that way. So what would you say to that?
Oh, I would say that's definitely what they're doing. That's definitely what they're doing, because the white supremacist ultimately knows that the biggest threat to them is a black man. So if they reduce the power or the prestige in the way that people see the black man, then they can try to weaken and cause division and a wedge in the black community, because they'll say, no, well, black women are the strongest. So now black women and black men can go back and forth about who is really like the leader of the community. And that's why I always say that one of the worst things that could have happened to the division of the relationship between Black people is, the whole feminism thing, because what it has caused is for the dominant society to try to convince a lot of Black women that they are a separate group from Black men. Then that's how you end up getting that shea butter samba class that I had talked about earlier. So I would say that it is a big thing, and that's part of what I mean by the indoctrination. Essentially, these movies and TV shows are teaching people, whether they like it or not, how they should behave, the way that they should think, and the issues that they should be concerned about. And controlled opposition is especially dangerous, because you actually even said something yourself too. You said, when you watched it, you watched Dear White People, you were like, oh yeah, some of this stuff is cool, but then after a while, you were like, That's because that's what they're trying to reel people in who are not like you and I, where they don't have that discernment and they can't say something is off here. They are doing that ultimately to make you feel like they're actually with you. They want you to feel, they want Black people to feel like they're with them in their struggle. So they make controlled opposition type of things to somewhat feel like like somebody or a group of people that can be trusted. So they try to make it seem like there are producers out there, there are people out there who really want to put positive images out there with us and want to help us fight more bad white people.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do notice it. And it takes a mind of, I've studied this subject and I'm aware of these tropes in order to tell it, because it didn't come like episode 1 and 2 is cool, and then episode 3 and 4 is like completely different. It was like it was like small little scenes that you'd catch, brief little scenes that you'd catch throughout the episodes or whatever. I noticed in a lot of these shows, and this is going to make a lot of people uncomfortable, but it's definitely a conversation that needs to be had. And a lot of these shows partnered up with the very pro-Black female is a gay Black man. So that tends to be a lot of, not even just in the shows that we mentioned, and for instance like Tyler Perry shows, or because he doesn't just have movies, he also has actual series, I think on BET. I think it's on BET.
Yep.
There's many different shows of a very gay or even a very effeminate Black man partnered up with like almost like a strong and independent kind of pro-Black woman. So it's kind of the way I see it, working on both ends. You're kind of burning the candle on both ends in that sense.
Yep. And then and that's where, like you said, the discernment and that vetting process comes into play. We really have to kind of look at not even just these images and what they're really trying to portray, but who has actually been impacted by them. And that's why I say, like, even in this book, it's not just about the fact that these images are bad and then that's it. It's not about a cosmetic type of thing. These are literally impacting people in real time, because then you'll see a lot of, again, I have to keep going back to them because it applies. But the Shea Butter Samba class, if you listen to a lot of them, when they start talking about issues, some of them will actually talk about racism. So don't get me wrong. Some of them will actually address some of these different things, but then they'll turn around and they'll couple Black people's issues with women's issues, and they'll start talking about intersectional things. If you start listening, you can tell the way that they've actually impacted them to believe that these issues are all equated. But we all know that racism is actually the thing that started a lot of these other issues, and they're just kind of offshots of that. And they've also like trying to indoctrinate us to believe that these things are really the, like equally things that we need to be concerned about. But going back to the LGBT thing that you had brought up, they do that quite often, where they have a Black man who is either more effeminate, or they have it where he's like you said, LGBT, because they want the image of us to maybe seem weak. And I'm not saying that somebody who is effeminate or LGBT is weak. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that most people will perceive them that way. And so they want that to be the norm for us, and they want us to eventually actually embrace that type of behavior, because of course we know that there are a lot of LGBT brothers out there who actually are codified. Because if you think about like James Baldwin back in the day, he was LGBT, but he was definitely down with Black folks. So it's more about like going along with their agenda than it is about how you classify yourself.
I think a lot of also, and this is why, for the audience listening, this is why you definitely have to get the book, because everything that we've discussed, you can't even really touch on it in as much detail. We're kind of touching on one thing and then trying to go through another thing so we can get as much of the subject matter discussed as possible. But it's a whole chapter on this and different examples and everything like that. So if you have something like, man, I was really interested in that subject or that talking point right there, and we kind of moved on quickly, that's because there's a lot of material to cover. So that's why you definitely have to get the book. Now, I want to say about the different especially the comparisons is what they're doing about like the feminine men, and we can all understand that. For instance, our brother James Baldwin, who was LGBT, and that wasn't a secret, he was openly LGBT, but he was black first. He put his blackness first. That was his priority. He did not conflict his black issues with an LGBT issues. He did not try to tether or crowbar the LGBT movement into the black civil rights movement or anything like that. So a lot of what we're seeing now is we're seeing a lot of people talk about the word intersectionality, and we're seeing a lot of people talk about how you can't separate black issues from women issues, and you can't separate black issues from LGBT issues, because there are black women, of course, there are black LGBT. So what would you say to people who say, well, you can't really divorce these two issues? These are not separate issues. These are all intertwined.
I mean, the first thing I would say to those people are that they're majoring in the minors. The reality is that when let me go back a little bit again. When you are pro-black, the biggest advantage, and this is something that I've talked about on social media quite a bit, the big advantage of being pro-black is that you are a big picture thinker. You think about where did all of this stuff start. You ask the who's and the what's. You don't just look at things that are like right in front of your face. So a lot of times when people are talking about you can't separate these two, this is because these issues are personal to them. So they're trying to find a way to try to make it seem like being a woman in black is its own separate group, as I talked about. So they try to make it seem like being a woman and having a certain race those are equal issues, when again, race impacted all these other things, whether it be your sex, whether it be your religion, whatever the case may be. With these, the other thing I would say too, with these people who talk about this whole intersectional thing that frustrates me is that they are really being hypocrites, because they're actually being biased. So they're trying to make it seem like they're talking about systemic issues, when ultimately, if you notice, people get into the intersectional thing, they never talk about the intersection of being like a black man and all the issues that they face. They just talk about, the issues of black women, black LGBT, and then they'll kind of even dissect LGBT. They'll say black gays, black trans. They'll kind of go into each of those, right? So they're so shrewd in the idea that they want to go through each little subcategory of who is affected, and then they just totally turn a blind eye to black men. That's why, and I haven't checked it in a while, but I would say a couple years ago, the Black Lives Matter website talked about who they advocate for, and black men were not even included, but they literally went through a whole list of people. They said black women, they're advocating for them. They're advocating for black trans, black gays. They might have said people of color, but black men was not on that list. So I noticed that they actually are hypocrites, because they don't really believe in the intersection. They believe in somewhat of a, maybe what's the word I'm looking for? Like maybe two halves. One end is like one half is black men alone, and then the other half are black women, the black gays, and all this other stuff, black trans, like they said, and then some black men who tend to simp, and they would all be on two different sides. So yeah.
Okay. I noticed that a lot too. The people who tend to push this intersectionality, and these are real issues that really do affect people, because for instance, if you're in high school 16, 17 years old, and you really are kind of, well, for a lot of us, our first racial incident or our first experience with racism starts way before our adolescence, when we first remember stuff. We're like, man, when I was I remember when I was 13 and this happened. I can remember back racial incidents. Um, back before I don't think I was even 13 years old at the time. So I can go all the way back. And I think that's a lot of foundational Black Americans. We can remember like a cop saying something slick or something like that.
Yeah.
But sometimes it takes us a little bit of time to kind of put that together, and then for us to develop our own interest in really like looking into these subjects. So I notice a lot of time, you know, like when people become like 15, 16 or whatever, then they really like, you know what, let me find my real history and do this and that.
Yep.
The coming of age, so to speak.
Yeah.
And a lot of times with the coming of age, they can be led into misinformation, and they can kind of get stirred down the wrong path of believing like all of this intersectionality thing, the black and brown and people of color and all of these other tropes and things like that they might think is conscious, but is really, like our brother said, controlled opposition. So that's why these subjects and this stuff is very important.
Yep. And the one thing I did want to say, like, of course, like there are issues between Black men and Black women, but we're not negating that. The problem that we have is that, you know, a lot of times they try to put these things in media in order to take the focus off the fact that anti-Black racism is the first thing that we need to be tackling. So when some people hear me say that, they may think, oh, well, he just don't give a damn about issues between Black men and Black women, and that's just dismissive. And it's like, no, there are issues and there are things that need to be addressed. But I think the problem is the hypocrisy and the fact that we need to look at the bigger picture before we can talk about in-house issues. And we also need to separate in-house issues from big picture issues as well, too. So that's the main thing, you know?
Yeah, I agree. You handle one thing, because the thing is that, and our brother Neely Falou Jr. talks about this, you can't solve any other problem until you solve the race problem. That is the biggest problem. We live in a system of white supremacy. We don't live in a system of male supremacy. We don't live in a system of heterosexual supremacy. We live in a system of white supremacy.
Right.
And even though people are like, well, they're white males who are straight, right? But the thing is that is not the unifying ideology of their supremacy. You know, because you had a lot of white women who owned slaves.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? You had a lot of gay white men who owned slaves. So the top thing of their supremacy is their whiteness. All right. So that is the biggest issue. And then all of the other things, like you said, they're offshots or derivatives of these other things.
Yep. Exactly.
So what would you say? Now, I know you got this book and it's becoming very successful. A lot of people are getting into it or whatever. What would you say were your favorite chapters or favorite tropes or agendas while you were writing this book?
Some of the ones that I like writing the most, as far as like the tropes I'll start with, were the ones that were attached to things that I had personally experienced, because it wasn't just therapeutic, but it also was it also gave me a real life example of like how this happens in our real world. One of the things that I've kind of noticed, like, for example, is we talk about cultural genocide. That's one of the categories that I talk about in this book. One of the tropes in that is the white street prophet trope. And that's broken down to a lot of different categories. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because a lot of times, you know, Black people aren't really confused by people who are blatantly racist. And I would even say that that's not even the norm at this point, but that's what gets showcased as the main issue of society, that you have this blatantly racist, almost KKK-esque type of person who is racist against Black people, when a lot of times racism is actually very hidden and is very covert. I bring this up because I've been in because I don't know if I've actually said this before on your platform, but I actually like do civil rights work myself, like actually as work. And so one of the things that I've seen in a lot of these spaces is that you have people who are white, and this is one of my wake-up calls to noticing that, it don't matter if you're a liberal, conservative, it don't matter if like you are in civil rights, you can still have a lot of like racist things that you do. And working in that space has kind of showed me that. So the white street prophet trope is important because a lot of people get confused because they think that if black people or white people either emulate or seemingly appreciate something related to black folks, that makes them not racist, when oftentimes those are some of the most racist people. And so that I enjoyed that because I think that something about being able to be right there in the presence of the one group of white people that you would think would not be like that, they are. And I got to talk about that. And I showed how you see that quite a bit on television, in movies, and even in real life when you think about like the Tim Wises and the Jane Elliots and people like that,
Yeah.
And like a lot of them taking black oppression and then really talking about it as a hobby more than as something that they really actually want to change. And as far as other things that I really enjoyed writing, I liked some of like the beginning chapters. I like writing chapter 4 was really cool because I really got to dig deep into numbers and showing data and stuff like that as well too. I like some of the beginning chapters, like especially the ones where I talk about debate terms and things like that, because I feel like I'm getting into teacher mode. I feel like at that time, I have the ability to teach people how they can look at these things for themselves. It's not just me just rattling off a bunch of tropes. Now, like you are actually watching these TV shows, watching these movies, looking at these things. And now you can see, for yourself where these things appear.
Okay. That makes me want to write a book because I got some things I want to talk about myself.
Yeah.
I definitely want to talk about myself, and I can definitely understand how that can be therapeutic, because this isn't just a book on comic books, but this is really a book on the area of people activity. Our brother Neely Fuller talks about they control all areas of people activity, and entertainment is one of those areas. So this isn't just about I saw a little bit of racism in this. This is talking about the whole field of the entertainment area of people activity. Okay, black people do tend to watch a lot of entertainment. I believe one study was saying that black people disproportionately have entertainment or have a bit of entertainment in their life. They overindulge in entertainment. And I think going back to what you said very early in this is that it is an escapism. It's a way to almost escape reality. Now, my question to you with that is, do you think that the fact that entertainment, movies, TV shows, comic books, fiction or nonfiction, do you think that because that is used as escapism, do you think that is why you receive so much pushback from the Sambo class? Because it's like you're ruining their escape.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think people believe that I'm ruining their fun. Like that's one of the comments that I make jokes with my wife about it sometimes, because sometimes I'll tell her about some of the like the trolls that I'll get, like when I talk about like my platform. And I was talking about this. I was talking about the Little Mermaid actually, and there was a brother who actually came onto my platform, like in the comments, and he was like, I don't really think about all this rape swap stuff. I'm simply trying to have fun. And so I always make a joke about it because I'm sitting there thinking like, this is a grown ass man who just doesn't want to tell his daughter that this is clear. There's clearly a race swap in the stuff that she's looking at, because when she grows up, what's going to end up happening is she's going to just capitulate to a lot of the stuff that they actually put out there. She's going to emulate the same behavior. She's going to want to try to get opportunities, with, the dominant society where they're actually, portraying, black women or black men in general, black women in a certain way. And I think the problem is that you're allowing your kids to be blind when you don't tell them about the things that are actually going on. And so I saw that quite a bit in the comments with this guy who was like going on and on about having fun. But the one thing that I noticed is that in my opinion, I think it's a bunch of us who really don't want to do the work and then make a better media, because there are ways that we can portray ourselves, positively. Like, we can put more content out that has, Black relationships where you see a Black man and a Black woman together harmoniously. You can have like codified Black men as main characters, as protagonists. You can have even LGBT. If you want to have a Black LGBT character, make them codified, make them like a James Baldwin. It's really not that hard. Like there's little things that you can do that are interesting and different and create very good Black stories. They don't always have to be a part of some negative trope. And so that's the thing that I was trying to, get at, is that I think that, a lot of the Black nerds who see this and they talk about, me ruining their fun, they're really just not trying to do the work, and they're leaving somebody else to do it, like me and you, and to call these things out.
Yeah, I noticed. Yeah, it's unfortunate because there are ways, like you said, there are definitely ways you can have fun. Nobody's trying to say we should not ever have fun.
Yeah,
I think I disagree. There's a lot of people like, we need to work, and never have fun, never enjoy enjoy ourselves. There's a balance in life. You enjoy yourself. You might watch a movie. You might watch a TV show that you find funny or entertaining, or the mystery that you might like to see. You should have those aspects in your life. There should be a balance between work and play. But the thing is that even in the play, and when we say play, we mean fun. Even in that, it shouldn't be blinded where you're all like, okay, as long as it's fun, I don't care how dangerous it is, because this is very dangerous.
Yeah.
Whether you know it or not, because even when you watch something, you start to think about it, and then it might make you view a situation with a person you're dealing with very differently, or whatever the case is, or how you experience or interact with racism very differently. So these are very dangerous things, especially for the youth.
Yeah.
Now, then that leads us to this situation. There's a lot of Black people who are trying to create like little cartoons, especially for children.
Yeah.
Series and things like that. And a lot of that is not, the audience is not as receptive to Black-owned entertainment as they are to Marvel or DC or some other well-known dominant society orchestrated fiction. Why do you feel that is? And what can we do to solve? And I know that's kind of like a double question.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that we can do. I think that we need to have like two things going at once, right? We need to have more and more Black creators doing, that type of thing and creating their own thing. I think when we do that, we eventually will create a wave. And I think that that's coming, and we're entering into that era. But we also need people like me out there who are going to call out what's wrong with the media right now. I think if you have these two things both going at once, then you have people identifying problems, but you also have people identifying solutions. So I think that there needs to be more of that. That's the first thing. The second thing that I would say too is, and this is part of the problem, is that we need to start calling out the people who have been affected, right? Because a lot of us don't necessarily have the capital to put these things out there where they're able to reach like a big audience. So I think what a lot of us wonder is like, what are celebrities doing who are Black? Like they get money when they're in a lot of these roles, and they're as far as like when they are acting in movies and TV shows and things like that. And you see a lot of them, basically take the money, they make a personal success of themselves, and they do whatever the dominant society basically tells them to do, right? What I think that is needed is for us to show people that if you're going to get into these types of spaces, there needs to be some level of integrity. These are the type of people who you do not want to be like. You want to be somebody who, even if you're going to go and you're going to, work for them and go in their backyard, you're going to take that money and then you're going to do something constructive with it. So I think that one of the things that we really need to focus on, and I said this before, is the kids. I think that if we can, teach kids about having integrity in these types of spaces, we can avoid having adults who basically are selfish and only care about, filling their own pockets. So there's a lot of things that we can do, man. But ultimately what I'm getting at is we need to create waves, continue those waves, teach kids so that they have integrity going in. And then we need to call out when people are actually doing things that are not constructive. And I think the days, and I've talked about this before in a post, the days of having like a Michael Jackson or a Prince, they're pretty much done. And I think that's the reason why we have to call out a lot of the celebrities who were kind of capitulating to these types of things. Michael Jackson and Prince, they did things that, and a lot of times, let's be real, they made white people comfortable. Don't mind you, they are legends. So I'm not disrespecting them at all. Matter of fact, Michael Jackson is actually my favorite artist. But the thing is that they did things that made white people comfortable, which allowed them to get money. And they were able to also do little codified things, like Michael owning 50% of Sony. He was about to take Universal as well, too, before they kind of got him with a bunch of stuff. Prince was also doing a lot of things for black people behind the scenes. My point is that that's an agenda, too. That's called the Black Insider Spy hustle. I would call that an agenda as well. That I haven't seen very much. A lot of people believe that Tyler Perry was going to be that type of person. I don't think so. A lot of people think that, I think at one point people were thinking Jonathan Majors might go in that area because of how successful he got. We know that ain't happening. But the point, but
even if he wanted to, that's done.
Yeah, that's done. But the point I'm trying to make is that we need some level of codification even before we go into their spaces if we decide to go in.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I definitely agree, because the thing is that people who go in and then next thing you know, like a lot of times you hear this is a chess move. Just give them time and they're gonna flip the script and then they're gonna kind of open the door and we're all gonna come in, and you don't really see that working out that much. Now you do see, like you said, kind of like the spy thing where they all like, okay, in public I'm gonna kind of be almost race blind, if I could use that. I'm not really gonna acknowledge it, but then behind closed doors, I'm gonna donate to this like library for black children or something like that, So it's a lot of that. You have even athletes. You have athletes who do that. I think Kyrie Irving, he's definitely one of those athletes. I think Kevin Durant, I think he does that as well too. Even though Kyrie Irving, he kind of is more vocal on issues than other athletes, but you have stuff like that, but not really a lot. More often than not, you don't have that. More often than not, they get in there, they trying to play the game, they trying to get as high as they can, and they act like they don't see any black issues. So a lot of times we need to, like, I agree, we definitely need to go in there, like every person, we have to have a social community code of conduct. So if you're getting in there, you're not going to be going against us, because I think a lot of the issue too now is you got a lot of celebrities who will kind of be working against the grain of black people. In a way, like for instance, the situation with George Floyd. Then you had the George Floyd uprisings, everybody's upset, they're outside, rightfully voicing their anger about the situation. And then you'll have like some celebrities who will be like, well, we do got to respect the police and we do got to stop doing this. And then what about black on black crime? And you'll have celebrities that tend to go against the grain. And then you'll have the dominant society be like, see, a black person said it, so it's not racist if a black person said it. So they'll be used as a weapon against us in a lot of cases.
Most definitely. And I think that's the reason why I also said that we need to make sure that we show that integrity, and we teach that to kids before they become adults, and it's in one ear and out the other. No, there are certain people who I think can make that change, especially when they've been educated. But I think the problem has to be like they're not necessarily educated on what's going on versus they're fully educated and they just don't give a damn and they just want to pad their own pockets. So yeah, I think it needs to start from the base, which is make sure your kids are codified on what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't have these kind of issues, and they're not confused. I feel like a lot of issues is that when it comes to I don't know why, but it's like we'll teach them racism when they reach a certain age.
Yep.
Or like how they'll have like the talk, and I'm not talking about the birds and the bees. I'm talking about like the police talk, like,
right.
Well, I want you to know, little Michael, that you are a black man, and some police officers, they just don't like black people. Like, that's always kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because I'm thinking like, what were you explaining to him before he reached the age of 15?
Yep.
Why is it like at 15 now he needs to sit down and have this talk, and now you're kind of giving it to him now as if you allowed him to reach the age of 15 without having these conversations or explaining this to him? Because as we can see in multiple situations in very recent time, a lot of these children, they have their interactions with police well before the age of 15.
Yep.
So it shouldn't be at the age of 15 where their parents are trying to sit them down and discuss it.
Matter of fact, I'll actually not even just that. I'll actually piggyback off of what you said. So when I used to live in Michigan, I used to live in this city called Kalamazoo. It was about an hour and 30 minutes from another city called Big Rapids. There's a college there called Ferris State. And so at Ferris State University, they actually have a Jim Crow museum. And they talk about a lot of racism back in the day. I decided to go there one day to visit the museum to kind of see some of the artifacts and things that, were there, because there was a brother who I don't know if he was a teacher or if he was just somebody who collaborated with the school, but he was from Alabama. So he grew up like during like Jim Crow. So he collected a lot of like items that showed racist memorabilia, just so people could be informed on what happened back in the day. And there's a lot of very good stuff in there. And one of the things that I saw was that they had board games, and they would actually like play board games with their kids, like the Dominant Society. They play board games with their kids to teach them how to be racist. So they were teaching them even when they were very young, like how to stay on code with white supremacy. So to your point, I guess what I'm saying is that this is a very systemic thing, because they didn't just, say, hey, little Timmy, like those like niggers right there, like, hardy R niggers there. They are, you're going to have to dominate them when you grow up. Or matter of fact, you can dominate them right now. Do it while you're in school. It's not just that. They literally are using games to teach these kids to be that way. And then they even did that too with like dunk tanks, because they had like this thing called African dip, where they would like have like black people, and they would like try to like dunk them when they were like try to drop them into like the little thing and stuff like that. That was based off of like racism, like the whole dunk tank.
Oh wow, I didn't know. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So my point is that like they actually used games to teach them.
That's just it's an evil world we live in.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It really is.
Yeah.
And we got to understand that, yeah, you can allow your kid to be a kid. And I think a lot of us, we kind of don't really cope with the trauma, because it's traumatic. We don't really cope with the trauma that well. So we want to kind of shield our kids away from anything racism, and like, let's just let them kind of live and have a happy childhood, before they have to deal with the negativity of the system of white supremacy. I think, and I'm just trying to be graceful, I think that a lot of the parents are trying to be, fair to the kids, trying to have the kids grow up in a decent, pure childhood, not trying to taint it, but what they're not seeing is that what they're not doing is preparing their child and really protecting their child the way they need to in order for them to be fully equipped by the time they, step outside without their parents around them, you know. And you don't see that from the dominant society. The dominant society, the second the kid is able to speak and walk on two legs, they're like, okay, well, now we got to train you to be the soldier. We got to train you bit by bit so you can be ready. When it comes to black kids, it's like play, 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 play. And then when he grows up, then let's have the talk. And then all of a sudden he's going to be ready. And it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. The other thing I want to say too, Afro, was I think folks are just dramatic. Like everybody loves to conflate shit all the time. What I mean by that is they think if they tell their kids about racism, that's going to ruin all their fun and ruin their whole damn childhood. They need to stop that. The reason why I say that is it also applies to adulthood a little bit as well, too. You earlier had talked about how when it comes to like media, there needs to be some form of balance. And that's true also when it comes to kids as well, too. Yes, we need to be codified. Yes, we need to know about these things that are happening with the dominant society. Yes, we need to know about racism. But we also need to use discernment to be able to pick out the things that we like and the things that we should be able to enjoy, while also recognizing certain things that we shouldn't do or certain things that we need to be careful of. So the same goes for your kids as well. Like I'm gonna give you an example. When it comes to your kids, you can tell them about racism and you can tell them about in subtle ways as well too. Well, not subtle. You can tell them in direct ways when certain situations come about. Like, for example, let's say that you send your kid to school and they become friends with a white kid or that type of thing. A lot of us as foundational Black Americans know that we need to be cautious when we have our Black son or daughter even go over some white people's houses, because we've seen a lot of times where a lot of them will go to hang out with white folks and then they'll come up unalive. So like, once you get into their like realm, anything kind of goes, right? Like that's not right. It's totally not right. And it's evil, but that is what happens. And I think that those types of things, like are good lessons to say like, hey, we want to make sure that we secure your safety. There's racism, and oftentimes people, although like this kid may be your friend or, they may be, I guess like saying they want you to come over, I have to think about everybody else this kid is around. And a lot of times they are racist, so that's a good time to be able to teach your kids those types of things. But I say that to say it doesn't ruin their childhood. It just teaches them certain things along the way when it comes to racism. And it's the same thing with entertainment when I'm talking about tropes. Just because I'm saying that this show has a trope, this movie has a trope, this game has a trope, that doesn't mean don't watch the show. That doesn't mean don't play the game. What that means is be discerning and being able to be alert and be able to look out for when these things exist. And even if you are a creator spirit, take the things that you see that you do like from the stuff that you watch and either make your own or support the people who are making things similar to what you enjoy and what you think is productive.
I respect that. I have a lot of respect for that, because the only way you're going to solve a problem, any problem, is by the absolute first thing you do is acknowledge the problem. You can't solve the problem if you don't acknowledge it. We as human beings, we're going to want some form of entertainment. Entertainment has existed for hundreds of years, whether that's theater, plays, dance, fighting. Entertainment has existed for hundreds of years. The concept of entertainment is not going away anytime soon. Most people like some form of entertainment, whether that's them playing a game, watching a game, something. Okay. It's all entertainment.
Yep.
But there are ways to have better entertainment. We can have better entertainment without subliminal agendas, without subliminal anti-Black tropes, without being mocked or made fun of or anything. You can have that, and in order for you to have that, you have to acknowledge that's what you're getting now. You're not going to solve the problem if we say, well, this is kind of what it is, let me just accept it. Because when you start calling it out and you raise the awareness that this is a problem, then the dominant society gets away with it much less. So then they're all like, okay, well, we're gonna have to kind of scale back on this because it's not subliminal anymore. They kind of noticing this and they're tuning out.
Yeah.
You know. So this is like you said, the first half of the wave that starts to create the change.
Right. And that's why I said this. It's almost like there's two waves that should be going on. There should be a wave of people who are identifying the things that we see that are negative, that are anti-Black, and there should be a wave of people who are creating the things that we want to see. And then those things are happening kind of in number. To me, it's almost kind of like politics. You know, always talk about how no reparations, no vote, and that type of thing. And then people come back and they're like, well, if that's the case, what do we do? What do we do next? That's a wave thing as well, too. You have Black politicians who will run reparations campaigns like Brother Marcel. But then you also have those who are going to support those politicians. But also we have another wave of people who are going to weaponize our votes for the people who are already there and basically say, you know what, we as Black people are not going to sit there and vote for you if you are not going to give us tangible things. It's almost the same thing. And I make that parallel to say that people think that entertainment and media is something that is menial, something that doesn't really have any real meaning and it's not really all that serious. But I'm like, no, these are connected to other things. And you can see parallels in other areas of activity where this also needs to go on.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. To the audience, I want you to understand, this is just really the tip of the iceberg of what's in this book. There's so much material. There's stuff that we could have gone a lot deeper on. We really could have did a whole video on one of these tropes or one of these agendas and brought up many different examples and things like that. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to cover as many major tropes as possible. So you guys definitely need to get a copy of this book. This is very important for you guys to get, not just for yourself, but also for your children as well, too. Just kind of as you're reading it, and you're like, especially if you have younger children and they're watching a cartoon, you'll be more aware of that. You'll be able to teach them like, hey, when you see that, you know what I'm saying, that's not good or whatever. Even if they make it seem like it's good, it's not. So this is very important because all of the subjects we've discussed here are not only in the book, they're in the book and they reach a much deeper level than what we were able to get into today.
Most definitely.
So let me ask, where can people get this book?
Absolutely. So you can get it on Amazon if you must, but I have to put out a disclaimer. Amazon takes like 70%. I get like 30. So you can get it there. And I would still be grateful, but Amazon.com is one place you can get it at. If you want to get it from me signed and delivered, you can follow me on Instagram. I will definitely respond back to you and get you your copy and whatever else that you need from me. I'm on Instagram at Cool Colas. I'm also on YouTube, by the way, Cool Colas as well, too. But Instagram is the main place where you would be able to contact me at and get a copy of this. I'm also on Twitter at Cool Colas. If you're not an Instagram person, you're a Twitter person, I can get you your copy there. But again, if you must, you can get on Amazon as well.
Okay. And I will have all of that stuff in the comment section below. So that way it can be easy for you to find it. You just click the link. You can message him on Instagram or on Twitter, whichever app that you prefer using. Message him on those things. And, you know, that way you can get your copy of the book. And it'll be signed too. So that's a lot better than what you'd get from Amazon.
And I probably should show them too.
You said what?
Probably should show them.
Oh, yeah. Let me make you.
So this is what it looks like, y'all. The Pro-Black Blurred series, exposing anti-Black media tropes the blurred way. So you kind of got my hand on it real quick. And then I'm going to show y'all the back. So that's what it looks like. And it's got my symbol in the corner as well, too. So y'all can kind of see that. So, sir, yes, sir.
All right. Okay. So where can they, I know we discussed a little bit in the beginning about your videos and how you kind of discuss things. your main platform is Instagram, right? That's the main platform that you make content on, even though you kind of make content on other platforms, but Instagram is kind of like the main platform. So that will be in the description as well too. So you guys, not only should you get a copy of the book, you should also follow him on Instagram as well too.
Appreciate it. Yes. And then I do have YouTube as well too. It's the same thing though, Cool Colas. So everything that I talk about on Instagram, I make as an extension on my YouTube channel as well too. And I may even do a little bit extra and kind of go more in depth.
Yes, indeed. So what would you say would be your final giveaway from today's kind of book review? What are your closing statements?
The main thing that I would say is that with this book, I want people to understand that my main goal is to educate others. So again, I could like lay out a bunch of tropes and then just say, this is what this is what that is, this is what an agenda is, this is what a subtrope is, and then leave it at that. But that was not my goal. My ultimate goal is to be somewhat of a help in educating you and being able to do it for yourself. I say somewhat because I can give you the tools, but you actually have to care. You actually have to want to be able to see that change as well too. And so it's all about integrity for me. It's all about us educating not just ourselves, but also our kids so that they are informed about the things that they are watching on television. And again, I make it very relatable so that if you are somebody who is into maybe not into comics, maybe not into that type of thing, I talk about regular shows as well too. But ultimately, I want this book to serve as an educational piece that you must get your hands on so that you can also look at media and understand what you are watching and what you are ingesting.
That's good. That's why you definitely have to get a copy of that book. All right. And follow our brother, because these are very important subjects. I'm sure many of you guys have been watching, have related to at least a few, even if you're like not a big media person, entertainment person, where you don't watch a bunch of different TV shows, because there's some people who watch very few TV shows. They have a very acquired taste. And they don't really tend to like a lot of stuff that gets put out in TV shows, but they like a few. But even if you don't watch all of the TV shows all of the way, you notice certain things. Like if you're just by happenstance, you're waiting on a doctor's appointment and you see something on the television in the waiting room, you see these things. These things are very obvious because these things play out in real life. These things play out in conversations in real life, and they affect how people think in real life. Some of these even affect the way politicians interact in real life and things like that. So all of these things are connected to each other. So that's that way. So you guys understand the importance. I don't want you guys to think that, well, I don't really care about Marvel. I don't really care about Superman. So it's not that big of a deal. No, there are other things that are beyond that play into this as well too, because this is a very important aspect of people activity that spreads and affects other things.
Most definitely.
So it's really good. Well, brother Cool Colas, I appreciate you for giving us your time. I appreciate you for developing this book. I know it took late nights, early mornings, a lot of going through, being all like, nah, I kind of want to say it like this, and then kind of second guessing yourself, especially, when you want to make it right the first time. You don't want to make this and then make a different edition and fix it. You want to make it right the first time. I don't have a book yet, but I can understand the process of that. And the book looked kind of thick too. You got 10 chapters in the book. So I'm sure you took a lot of time to put as much digestible information in this book as possible on many different layers.
Most definitely. I did want to say one more thing too about that. You're absolutely right. It was a lot. The one thing that, I would say that I probably, I wouldn't say struggled with, but one thing that kind of kept getting me was there was so much story that I wanted to tell. So the second guessing came in sometimes when I'm like, I want to say this and this and this. But then like I had to look back and I'm like, a couple examples are enough. So that was something where I was like, man, I really want to tell it all, but I also wanted enough where it's concise and digestible.
Yeah. Which is good too, because a lot of times when people make books, you have to understand that the book isn't really for you personally. The book is really for the reader.
Absolutely.
So you have to understand that a reader who has not gone through the life experience you go through, this might be really overwhelming. You want the reader to pick up the book and finish the book. You don't want the reader to pick up the book and be like, wow, there's a lot going on. I don't really know.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
So, and I can understand it might be kind of challenging or difficult to decipher what situations you want to implement in the book or what examples that you want to use in the book, because there's so many examples you can use, but you want to pick the one that you probably feel is the most well understood or the most easy to tell.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So I
Most
understand
definitely.
that's a challenge in and of itself.
Most definitely. It's like I said, you nailed it when you said that you know, when you write books, you're writing them for other people. You're not really writing them for you. There's things that you can get out of it. And that's why I said there's some things that I personally got out of it, but ultimately it is for my audience and people who are like-minded or who want to get the game to be able to, you know, benefit from what they can learn from this book and what they can learn from looking at media and just analyzing it and being careful about what they're ingesting, you know?
Yes, most definitely. Well, I appreciate your time. We'll definitely be having you back. I'm glad to see. I've seen a lot of his success on his books. He's posted Instagram lives and different videos of book signings. There's a lot of different people, you know, holding up the book, taking pictures of the book.
Yeah.
So I like to see that the book is actually doing well. And I hope that after this is published, I hope a lot of people flood to the book, because I know I have a lot of fans who are into entertainment, and they would probably find a lot of benefit with this book, like I have. So there's a lot of benefit with this book. So I hope you guys get it. And then not only do I want you guys to get it, I want you guys to let us know what you think. Like, message him on Instagram or leave a review or something like that. Regardless of where you get it from, leave a review, message him on Instagram, make a post. That's really good. Make a post about it. Say, hey, I read this book. I really like this chapter, or I really like this point, and this is kind of reminding me of this TV show or this movie I used to watch, or whatever the case is, or even something that happens in my life personally. You know, so you guys do that, because that really spreads the awareness of the subject matter. And like our brother was saying, that goes into creating this wave that is necessary to fix the problem.
Most definitely. Yeah, that's all that. The other thing I was going to say too is that I do always appreciate too when people do come back to me and they're like, hey, I read this, or I saw this piece and this really spoke to me and whatnot. So I'm definitely open to having those conversations with folks if you do want to message me or you do want to say something on social media once you do get the book. So definitely, I want to have that engagement. I definitely want to connect with more people who did resonate with it. So yeah, that's the goal at the end of the day.
Yeah. We gonna fix these problems, family. We're gonna do it together. We're gonna do it together. Okay. This is a big success. But brother Cool Colas, I want to thank you. We had a really good conversation. We'll have you back sometime soon. Most definitely. Keep up the good work. I definitely respect you. We need more black blurs out there who is calling it out, because a lot of them, like you said, they indulge in escapism. And a lot of them give passes to some of the racism. Now, when I call it out, my platform isn't, I address it sometimes, but my platform isn't about the entertainment sector of people activity.
Right.
So it's good for somebody to really kind of specialize on that subject because it's very important.
Most definitely. And by the way, I do appreciate you having me on on your platforms, and it was a great conversation. So yeah, most definitely.
Oh, thank you. Audience, make sure you guys get that book and all of his information. Follow him on everything: Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. All of that is in the description below. You can also follow me on my various social media platforms, and that's Afro Elite on Instagram and then the Afro Elite on Twitter. And make sure you guys do not leave without hitting that like button and subscribe button as well too. Good brother, I appreciate you, brother Cool Colas. I appreciate you. Thank you for joining us.
Most definitely. Appreciate it.